Oklahoma can't win. There's no way. MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football, breaking down the semifinals. This one at the Peach Bowl with the Sooners taking on the LSU Tigers. We got Jason Ray on the line from Last Word on College Football. Jason, how you doing today?
Doing good, Mark. It's it's almost Christmas Eve, and we're about 5 days away from the game, so it's an exciting time.
Yeah, I reminded somebody just last night, they were thinking more close to New Year's Day. I said, no, it's coming up on Saturday night. We're less than a week away. So, yes, we're barely into bowl season, and we're looking at the two most important, of course, for the national championship coming up. Oklahoma, a substantial underdog in this one against LSU, and Sooner fans, please just give me a break here. I was kidding off the top. Of course, they're going to play a football game. I've been watching college football forever, so I've seen much stranger things than this. These are two very good football teams. It would not shock me in the slightest if Oklahoma won this game, regardless of the point spread here. They do have some challenges, obviously, that we discussed with Jason just a few days regarding the suspensions of Ronnie Perkins and Ramondre Stevenson in particular. Also, the former five-star cornerback who's been playing special teams this season as a freshman. So we have some indications out there on social media and other sources, Jason, that these players could be reinstated, possibly. It's not been confirmed.
Yeah, that's right, Mark. I think it's kind of broke over the last hour and a half. That so I think how it first started on a couple of local radio stations here in the Oklahoma area. The play-by-play guy had kind of hinted towards a couple of Oklahoma might be getting some good news in terms of a couple of players might come back, and then it was leaked that both Ramondre Stevenson and Ronnie Perkins definitely made the trip with the Sooners to Atlanta, and then also have been practicing with the team there in Atlanta. So Teddy Lehman, one of the also he works on the former linebacker for Oklahoma, also works on the Oklahoma radio crew, and he also had mentioned that it's a real good possibility on the air that they might get those guys back if they kind of backed off of it on social media, on Twitter a little bit. So I think given the way Riley probably won't comment too much on it officially until game day, knowing the way he is. He was pretty non-committal about it, earlier when the news dropped that the suspensions would happen. So if that does occur, that's certainly a big bonus for Oklahoma, particularly on the defensive line side of the ball. We talked about earlier, Ronnie Perkins does lead the Sooners in sacks on the year with 6 sacks, and then Ramondre Stevenson has really kind of put himself into that backup running back role with the injury to Trey Sermon earlier in the year, and he's kind of been more of a closer late in the year, as we talked about, and especially off of Kennedy Brooks's injury in the Big 12 championship game. Doesn't seem to be too severe, but not sure how he'll be holding up. So if those two guys are indeed back for the bowl game here, that's certainly a big benefit for the Sooners.
Unfortunately for Lincoln Riley and company, there is not a question concerning the safety, DeLaron Turner-Yell, who's the second leading tackler on the team. So this is a huge loss. That is confirmed. Fractured collarbone, out.
Yeah, I mean, Mark, you could almost make a case that injury is bigger than either the Ronnie Perkins or the Ramondre Stevenson suspension. As you mentioned, he's the second leading tackler on the team, really the primary run supporter from a safety position. He's been tremendously improved much like a lot of the defensive players are, but he's been a much improved player from last year at this time to this year at this time. So I think that'll be a bigger loss, Mark, just in terms of depth. Oklahoma doesn't have the depth that they would like in the secondary. And Alex Grinch has said that a couple of times over the year that he's not seen the quality depth that emerge. He mentioned that in spring and then fall and then also through the year, the quality depth emerged that he would have liked to see. So you'll probably see Justin Broyles. He started last year, played sparingly towards the end of the year, has played sort of a backup role to Turner-Yell towards the end of the season. So you'll see him in that spot it's a difficult, certainly a difficult spot for him to be in, to bring in a guy who's probably played, I don't know, Broyles probably played 10 to 15% of the snaps over the year, and face, was one of the best receiving core in the country against LSU.
Yeah, Broyles with 15 tackles. Turner Yell with 75, 5.5 tackles for loss, and a leader in that secondary. Huge loss confirmed, obviously, based on injury. The suspensions, if they can get cleared up, then that brings back, as you mentioned, Jason, of course, the #1 sack artist on the team, and Ramondre Stevenson, who's been a big play threat in relieving Kennedy Brooks down the stretch. LSU has its own issues in regards to a running back situation with Clyde Edwards-Hilaire, one of the best in the SEC with 16 touchdowns. We've discussed that with our LSU folks, and want to get to some matchups. So people love the secondary versus the wide receiver matchups. Those are the freak athletes. Those are the guys out in space who can really run and move and twist and turn, high point the football, and those are the guys that are fun to watch on the outside. It is certainly a interesting matchup with CeeDee Lamb and the Oklahoma wide receiver core taking on Derek Stingley and what might be certainly one of the top 5 units in the country, maybe the very best in college football at LSU.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's that matchup. You would expect to see Lamb on Stingley a majority of the game, and I would certainly expect Oklahoma to. I mean, they're not going to shy away from CeeDee Lamb just because of who is on him. I think one thing that's interesting, kind of doing a couple of previews this week. Georgia, I think in the SEC championship game, Georgia went after Stingley 15 times, and I think of which they completed 2 passes and one interception. So I think it's one of those things that you want to be choosy on how you go after him. But I think it's certainly Oklahoma's best, certainly the best wide receiver on the team with CeeDee Lamb. You've got to get him his touches. And I think, when you look at both receivers in this game, Mark, you look at CeeDee Lamb, you look at Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase, certainly the Biletnikoff Award winner, CeeDee Lamb, the second. You probably have 2 NFL wide receivers playing college football. Probably, CeeDee Lamb, this is probably going to be, if the Sooners don't win, this will probably be his last game in the Sooner uniform. Most people think he'll be a high draft pick. So I think whoever is able to take most advantage of those big plays, and whatever defensive secondary can tackle the best in space. I think both of those receivers are big kids. They're good with the ball in their hands. One of the biggest improvements CeeDee Lamb has been able to make over this year from last year is, it is what he does after the catch. He had a big, I think about a 70-yard catch and run, which was really just kind of a swing pass in the Big 12 championship game, who kind of set Oklahoma up on their first touchdown. So yeah, if Oklahoma is able to, to get him in space, it certainly heightens their chances to win the football game.
CeeDee Lamb, 58 catches, 14 touchdowns, one of the great playmakers in college football. And as you mentioned, Jason, I've certainly seen a huge difference in regards to the runs after the catch, that he's been remarkable in some of the runs that he's made in the open field, both from a physical standpoint of shedding tacklers and being difficult to bring down, and then obviously just the moves and the agility of getting past people. So that's going to be an elite matchup when you talk Oklahoma offensively against LSU defensively through the air. When you flip it, that could be the concern. Jamar Chase, Terrace Marshall, Justin Jefferson and company. LSU goes 4 deep at wide receiver with elite guys. The Oklahoma secondary, we addressed the issue with Turner Yell out of the lineup. How do you think Oklahoma compensates defensively in the secondary versus what might be the best wide receiver core in college football?
I think it's a difficult challenge that Grinch has in front of him. I think Oklahoma certainly hasn't seen the wide receiver depth that LSU is going to throw out them with the 4 individuals that you mentioned. I think you'll probably look to see, the blueprint. Auburn may have given everybody the blueprint, if everybody else had 2 first-round draft picks on their defensive line, but unfortunately, certainly Oklahoma doesn't have that. I think the one thing that you saw Georgia do, which I think conceivably is probably what you would think would be most successful against LSU early on is they just rush 4, they sit back, and sometimes they even rush 3, they sit back, and 7 and 8 guys in the secondary. And what proved to happen is the LSU offensive line gave Burrow enough time to find some open receivers, and he shredded them early on, with that tactic. So I don't think you'll see Grinch sit back very often. Maybe in third and very long, predictable situations you might see that, but I think you'll see him bring the pressure a little bit. I think early on, from a kind of a feeling out perspective, will be interesting. I think you might see Oklahoma, rush 4 and 5 and see if they're able to get home with those 4 and 5 guys, especially with Perkins in the game, if he is able to play. They put tremendous amount of pressure on Baylor in the Big 12 championship game, and they didn't blitz a lot. Really, their front 5, front 6 was able to get a lot of pressure. I believe they sacked Baylor quarterback 6 or 7 times in that game. So I think you're not, Burrow is one of the best pure pocket passers that we've seen in the game in really quite some time. He's pretty similar to Baker Mayfield. Maybe has a little bit of a stronger arm, but very similar in terms of how they're able to kind of pick you apart from the pocket as well. So I think I think it's not just one thing. I think Grinch will have to be conscious of mixing up his coverage, blitz, zone schemes, man. Oklahoma does a lot of stunts right at the snap, which has been, widely successful this year. That's a staple of kind of Grinch's defense. But at the same time, there has been a couple of times where he's been, the defense has got caught a little bit out of position with that late shift. But I think in order for Oklahoma to be successful in this game, they're going to have to get pressure. If they can't get pressure, whether it be with 4, whether it be with 5, or if they're blitzing, it might be a little bit of a long day for the Oklahoma defense.
From a point production standpoint, as you mentioned, Auburn by far, not even close, the most successful against LSU. Took the Tigers in Death Valley to a 23-20 game, so they limit LSU to 23 points, only 10 in the first half, 13 in the second half, but they did give up 30 first downs and 508 yards. So they played very disciplined. They tackled in space. They gave up a lot of completions to Burrow, but they tackled people, and they made LSU drive the length of the field, and they also played great red zone defense in that game, and they had a big turnover or 2 in the red zone. And so they made the plays when they had to. They held LSU to field goals. They just played an outstanding game and still gave up the yardage. But that's an Auburn defense that's one of the 5 to 10 best in college football. So Oklahoma is going to have to play its best effort, obviously, against this LSU attack. Got Jason Ray on the line from Last Word on College Football, talking LSU into Oklahoma. We encourage you to dive into the videos and lock it in right here. Like, comment, share the videos, and subscribe here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We've seen this type of, this is a bit of a stretch, David versus Goliath. Obviously, Oklahoma's one of the, regardless of how we shake it out, they're the number 4 team in the country, and they're certainly one of the top 5 or 6 teams in the country based on ability. And LSU might be the best. They might be the second best, third best, whatever they are. There's something in that range and considered better right now. We'll see them play on the field, but they're in the same category when it comes to talent. We've seen much greater upsets, but not a whole lot of people giving Oklahoma the chance. Of course, Ohio State pulled it off as a 2-point or a 2-touchdown underdog against Miami in a national championship game. Texas got sick of hearing how great USC was and that they had a team of the century and upset them to win the national championship. And we could cite a number of other examples. Do you think Oklahoma is genuinely using this rallying cry as motivation that nobody's giving them a chance?
Yeah, I really think they are, Mark. I think that, it's a very similar situation to what they were in a year ago against Alabama. I think, conceivably most people, if you put a truth serum in most people, they would have thought Oklahoma really didn't have much of a chance last year, mainly because of the defense. They thought that Oklahoma could probably score with Alabama, but the defense, as we've talked about all year, was much worse. And I think even with the injury to Turner Yell, and even with the possible suspensions, the defense is what is what this season has been about. It's the difference in the season of 2019 versus 2018. Overall, 25th ranked in the country defensively, just a dramatic improvement that they've seen. And I think that's what gives most people the thought that Oklahoma does have a chance in this game. I mean, I think to your original point, Mark, you see a lot of fans, you see a lot of players, and reading kind of between the lines in some of their interviews and some of the things that Riley has talked about. He even had an interview with ESPN and said, was talking about some of the suspensions and the injuries, and he made the comment that we're going to go ahead and show up and see what happens. So, I think when you hear him say like that, he's very Riley. A lot of coach speak out of him, close to the vest. When he says something like that, then I think you can see that they're kind of using that us against the world mentality. I think when the bowl announcements came out, they had asked David Pollock on ESPN what the chances were, and he said Oklahoma might have a chance if they're able to move the ability for kids to transfer in a little bit quicker. So I think you've seen a lot of just kind of just disrespect for Oklahoma even having a chance in this game, and it reminds me a little bit. I think for some people maybe it may be a little bit of wishful thinking, but it reminds me a bit of the 2000 Orange Bowl when Oklahoma played Florida State. Oklahoma was a little bit different circumstance in terms of Oklahoma being the #1 ranked team in the country, but Florida State was about a 13-14 point favorite in that game, if I remember. And I think there's a few similarities in that, in terms of Oklahoma had a quarterback, Josh Heupel, who was second in the Heisman to the winner, Chris Winkie, that year. Oklahoma had sort of a dream season coming off a 7-5 season the year before. Like I said, they were undefeated coming into that game. Oklahoma came in second in a lot of national awards, which is really the same as what's happened this year, whether it be the Heisman, whether it be the Assistant Coach of the Year award, which Grinch finished second to, and Joe Brady won from LSU. So a lot of those things bring back some potential memories, of course, of just Oklahoma just feeling like they're not in the conversation. You have Clemson, you have Ohio State, you have certainly LSU, and then it's kind of Oklahoma's just kind of down there in terms of just the other team that someone else had to get in. So Oklahoma was certainly the most deserving. So I think one as we talk about keys to the game, one key is how does Oklahoma handle things early. Last year, they looked to be a little bit intimidated. I don't know if it was intimidation, or I don't know if it was Oklahoma was a bit surprised on how physical and how tough and how ready Alabama was particularly up front, and they got down 21-0 early, and they really weren't able to recover. They were never, it was an 11-point game at the end of the game, but they were never really in the game. Oklahoma's going to have a lot of success early on in the game. They can't get down a couple of scores, because I think for the first time, and it's kind of odd to hear, because most people, over the last few years would have, of course, subscribed to this, but I don't think Oklahoma has any interest in a high-scoring game with LSU in a shootout. Oklahoma, they're not equipped this year as they were in the previous 3 years, probably to potentially win a shutout. So Oklahoma's going to have to, kind of stay in the game early. Ride that storm. I think there's you're probably going to see about 75% LSU fans in the stadium, from some of the things that I've seen and heard. So lots going to be against them. So I think they're probably welcoming that us against the world mentality, and just seeing what happens.
The Oklahoma defense pitched a shutout in that 2001 Orange Bowl to win the national championship. Of course, they gave up 2 points, but that wasn't their defense. They pitched a shutout against what was arguably the best offense in college football, in winning 13-2, 15 points. I think we'll get 15 points like in the first 3 minutes of this game. I think we'll be in the 75 range. I don't know what the over-under is, but LSU, Oklahoma, and yes, Lincoln Riley, I think will decide to put the team on the bus and have them show up for the game. 11-point was the point spread in this game, according to Wikipedia. 11 points. And obviously the Sooners pulled it off, and we've seen this happen a number of times. It wouldn't be a shock to me, at least, if Oklahoma pulled off the upset at the Peach Bowl. Jason Ray, last word on college football, breaking down the game for us. We appreciate you stopping by.
All right. Thanks for having me on, Mark. I appreciate it.